I'd want to think about 3 questions that need to be answered aside from Jordan Love. Aside from Jordan Love, what are 3 questions that need to be answered going into training camp? I got a couple. Let's probably have more than 3. Number 1, what does the offense look like now with 2 athletic tight ends? I think both those kids find significant playing time. Musgrave, obviously, probably penciled in to be the starter. I mean, you got second round, third round guys. Tucker Kraft being a third round player, smaller school. Musgrave's coming off injury. They both look the part. They just passed the eyeball test. You think that they both, neither of them are playing on the ball wide tight end primarily in their offense. In other words, if there's 2 guys in, there's another guy that's a blocking tight end, but they can both block. I think they're both willing blockers. Who they have coaching them is going to be super important. But just from what you've seen from that, I keep going back to Kyle Shanahan offense. What does that look like? How can we utilize those guys, whether it's at a Y and an F position, whether DeGuara becomes the F, which we saw a little bit in training camp or in mini camp, excuse me. I just think there's a huge opportunity here in this National Football League where you have 2 athletic tight ends that can both catch the ball and get it done in the blocking game at the second level linebacker safeties. Defenses do not know how to play that. The pendulum has swung from 12 personnel all the way over here to exclusively like 11 personnel, and you're going to get, or even like you're going to get 4 or 5 wide receivers on the field. The tight end's not going to be able to block, so he's really just a slot wide receiver. And you have 2 guys that can block in the game all the time. So you have to change how you play defense. When you change how you play defense, you open up the passing game. So I just think there's so much we can do from a run game standpoint because you have avid blockers with good bodies. Like these guys are both 240 plus. They're fast and they're just capable. They can be good route runners. They have good hands. I just think there's so much you can do with that offense. I'm so excited to see what that brings. 2, along the same lines. Do we think Christian Watson can take that next step and become what I just call a game plan guy? There's a handful of guys in the league at wide receiver at any position where the defensive coordinator, as they put up, so you get into the room on Wednesday, you sit down, you crack your drink, you get a sip of water, you put in your tobacco or your chewing gum, whatever it is you're going to get yourself through the meeting. You open your notebook, you pull out your pencil. The defensive coordinator walks up to the front and he says, here's their team, and the scouts usually put up like a chart, and they'll have like a color coded chart. So like if you're a green player, you're like Hall of Fame worthy. Blue is a solid starter. Red, average. Yellow, not bad. And whatever the last color is, brown means that if you lose a single rep to this guy, you should be kicked off our team. And this, what the scouts say, by the way, usually doesn't line up with what the players and the coaches think, but that's not relevant. But the coordinator will come up and he'll say, listen, we got to stop this guy. And they'll point to, obviously the quarterback or the running back or the tight end or the wide receiver. If it's Walter Jones, they'll point at the left tackle and they'll have a plan for those guys. But the important part is, what I'm trying to bring up is Christian Watson. If this team wants to take the next step, Christian Watson has to be a guy that defensive coordinator circles. Hey, we got to cloud one guy over the top all the time. We got to run bracket on him. We're not going to run press man. Like he's too fast, too big, too strong. We cannot single cover him and expect to have a successful day. If they get that, then all the other stuff opens up. A.J. Dillon looks better. Aaron Jones looks better. Those 2 tight ends look better. Jordan Love looks much better because whether it's Jalen Reed, whether it's Romeo Doubs, whether it's Luke Musgrave, whether it's Tucker Kraft, whether it's A.J., whether it's Aaron, all those other guys are going to be single covered. Sometimes in zone, they're going to be forgotten about. And all you have to do now is just play like the pre-snap game. Take what you see. Question number 3. What will the coaching staff change on defense to improve execution, specifically for me, on block protection and tackling? Because you got 2 issues. 1, you miss too many tackles. 2, we do a very poor job at getting off blocks in order to tackle players. And I'm talking about not only defensive line, but you're talking about specifically maybe Quay Walker going to his second year, a lot to learn, great athlete, great potential. You can't make every tackle 8 yards down the, off the line of scrimmage. You got to be able to take on a guard, take on a center, block protection. That's what we call it. How do you stack and shed? How do you strike? Step, same foot, same shoulder. Can you rip underneath? Do you have an arm over? Do you have a catapult play? Like, what are the different ways you release from a blocker so you can get those tackles and hit the hole, a la our backup guys like Ala McDuffie? Can we make more plays at the line of scrimmage in the hole, 1 yard gain, 2 yard gain, not 8 yard gain, 9 yard gain? So what are we going to do from a coaching standpoint? Are we going to make that a point of emphasis? Have we done that in mini camps? Doubt it. From all things I've heard, no. Are we going to make that a point of emphasis? Are we going to be more physical in training camp? Are we going to spend more individual time doing it? Are you going to have those things pre and post practice? Are you going to have work-ons for each individual player? What are we going to do to make those guys better? What's the plan? What's the plan? I have an individual, I call it IDP, individual development plan. Individual development plan for some of these guys is like, hey, we got to get off blocks better, or hey, we got to tackle better. Okay, great. How do you want me to do that? You got to make it what I call frictionless. You got to make this a frictionless environment. You got to create no friction between what you want them to get accomplished and them wanting to do it. Okay, we're going to set up drills before practice. We're going to set up drills after practice. You guys are catching jugs machines. We want you to tackle once a week. What are we going to do to make these guys better? Question 4. Which second-year player makes the biggest jump on defense? Is it Quay Walker? Devonte Wyatt? Is it Enagbare? Or, and I don't think he's a second-year guy, but is it a guy like Rudy Ford? Is it a guy who's coming in from last year, has earned the free safety starting job right now going into camp? Or like even a Nixon playing nickelback? Who's going to make that jump? Now, for me, the guy that we want to see is Devonte Wyatt, because we're missing production at that position now, getting rid of Meaney and Lowry. And when you look at, we'll tackle this a little bit later, when you look at the best defensive lines in the league or the best defenses in the league, a lot of the power comes up the middle. And Kenny Clark is a very, very productive player. I know statistically he didn't have his best season last year. He's still a guy you have to game plan around. You have to be aware of, especially, you saw early in the season, especially the Minnesota game, the first game of the season. He's out there killing people, but sometimes you have to take on too many double teams. You have to create that second player that can provide a push. Meaney and Lowry did that 2 years ago, not as much last year. If Devonte Wyatt can be that guy, if he can take it to the next step, you're talking about a ton of extra tackles for loss. You're talking about, probably knocking a yard of yards per carry off the average for the team. More tackles for Devondre Campbell, more tackles for Quay Walker towards the line of scrimmage. All these things, having that defensive tackle as a real stalwart and a playmaker makes a huge difference. And Devonte Wyatt's one of those penetrating kind of guys that can, maybe more than Kenny, is just a natural. He just kind of comes off as a natural pass rusher to me. When I'm looking at both of them, who do I rather, in their primes, when they're experienced, just the way they move, the way they wiggle, all that kind of stuff, which one I think, for me, Devonte Wyatt can turn into that player. So for me, I hope it's that guy. Quay Walker could take a big leap. Certainly. Enagbare, he might get some chances here early in the season because of the injury to Rashawn Gary and what that looks like. But I think Enagbare, I like him as a player a ton. Unless there's just a certain size at which you stop fearing people, right? Like if you get a defensive end, if you get down to, let's be ridiculous about it. If you get down to 200 pounds, I don't care about you, right? You get up to 265, I'm going, man, you can bull. There's a lot of things you can do. It's not just speed. So the last question with defense is can Lucas Van Ness, I think he was the 13th pick in the draft. And listen, you got to remember, like, coaches were telling him to stay in school for another year. There's a lot of kind of, is this the right idea? He knew he was going to be a combine killer. Can he live up to that 13th pick? Because for me, the 13th pick is like, you got to be an automatic starter. You got to have a big impact player. And what does that look like in the Green Bay Packers defense? Because you got Preston Smith, Rashawn's coming back, so he could start early. Certainly, I don't know if he's ready to do that, but he could start early. He certainly has the athletic tools. Doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the football intelligence, but what does that learning curve look like? What defines a good year from him? Can defeating a tight end consistently be considered good enough for a good year in the run game? Does he have to have 5 sacks? Is 5 sacks good enough in his first season? Um, what are those statistics? And I think for me, I think the most important thing is, can you defeat your blocker and can you create pressure on the quarterback? Let's not say sacks, but can you force the quarterback to get off his spot? Can you do that against a tackle, a tight end, whoever's coming out of you? Do you know how to defeat chip blocks? And then I guess part of that is going to be, if you move him around, he can be a jack of all trades, master of none. If you keep him in the same spot and let him get good, it might take longer, but in the long term, he'll be better. So what approach do they want to use? Because I don't think he's at this stage, certainly not a finished product and not a polished product, but I think he certainly has the measurables, and obviously whatever was said in the interviews, he's got the cognitive and emotional traits that the Green Bay Packers want. So then what you're really talking about is like, what is the situation that is going to project him into an all-pro? Because that's what a 13th pick in the draft should be, a defensive end for the Green Bay Packers. He should be an all-pro player.